Sister, I love this story about the men in your class getting excited about the sacredness of the body and their call to order the garden, to cultivate, till the garden, to bring a sense of divine order to things. And you said that kind of thrills a man's heart. To me, it's like an echo of Genesis where he sings when he sees Eve, right? He marvels, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, that he appreciates the great gift of femininity in the woman.
And men have insight into how things work. So the fact that Adam in one of the creation stories was created first, he was alone for a long time, it was him and God and the animals, and he learned how things worked and how the world worked, and he knew the animals so well he could name them. And then Eve comes along and he realizes she's completely different from any of these animals, and he bursts forth in a poem. It's the first utterance, human utterance in the Bible is a poem about how beautiful a woman is, right? But for the woman, her first purview has always been included the human. So she always includes the human in all of her deliberations, and she can help to, while the man is civilizing the world, she can help to civilize persons. That's her specialty, and her gift is to teach children, teach men how to love, how to put the human first.
And even like the mother kind of introduces the father to the children, brings them into that realm.
So she has that immanent love. She reflects God's immanent love. God right here, God with us, God here and now in the moment, drawing, even like the way a woman's arms are made, are meant to draw the world to herself to make it a better place, whereas men's bodies are made to go out and work on the world to make it a better place. And again, this isn't saying like women can never work outside the home. We're not saying that or whatever, or men can never be a stay-at-home dad. It's just how our bodies are and how our souls are. So when we talk about masculinity and femininity, we don't want to stereotype. We don't want to create caricatures or glass ceilings or boxes to put people in or labels. It's just what flows naturally from the body and soul of a woman or a man, and what they're good at. So the design of something shows what it's made for and what it does best.
And if we stay in that line, we find a fulfillment. We find a joy and a fulfillment of flourishing.
And as you said, gifts. We were talking about this earlier, and you were talking about, it's not just roles, you know, gender roles, it's the gifts of women and the gifts of men, which John Paul II and Benedict and Francis have all spoken about. And if women, for example, don't honor our own gifts, because we think they're smaller gifts than a lot of male gifts, which tend to be the big, external, flashy, you know, create cities and things like that. Our gifts create international peace. You know, if everybody had empathy, personalization, subjectivization,
recognition of dignity of life,
interpersonal communication, listening to everyone's opinion, you know, those kinds of things make for that. So it's not one is superior, we're just different. But we're meant to put our gifts together and work together for the full picture.
And John Paul said that so often, to bring both at service of culture, society. And that it's so needed.
And there's always this pushback. So sometimes the male is starting to dominate. So the female should push back. Sometimes the female, we have our own ways of dominating, and men should need to push back so that we can achieve that beautiful balance. But we also need men to lead, you know, and because when men lead, women and children can flourish. When good men lead, women and children can flourish. When good men don't lead or aren't allowed to lead, women and children have to scramble and do everything for themselves. And we know the sociological data is not good. The plan is to have men and women raising children together, if at all possible, right? So, but we have to let each other give our gifts. So men have to not dominate women, but let us do our thing, right? And women have to appreciate men's gifts and let men do their thing, even though it's not the same. Our gifts are not identical.
And I see that in marriages so often, like they have a number of children and the men just have a sense of like the domain, and where you let the women feather the nest, build the home, the heart of the family, and there's a wonderful flourishing there. Let's quickly talk about the sexual revolution. You talk about, we speak of sexual revolution as, you know, in the 60s, the separation of sex and procreation, disintegration of marriage, hookup culture, all that. You say that's bad for the human person. In what ways is it bad?
So just a quick, talking about men and women, I heard a priest say recently that the sexual battle, the battle of the sexes, women lost. In the sexual revolution, we lost, because the point was free sex, right? And that's what men were always trying to get women to do.
Right.
And once we did that, we lost value in the sight of men, in men's eyes, and everything that came with it, abortion and everything else. So women, because men learn externally, women are always teaching men and telling men what our value is. And the value we place on ourselves is what men learn is our value.
Yeah.
So I've actually made a chart. So when I teach theology of the body, we have what God, creation, the Bible, church, and science are saying, and they're all on the same page about what is actually good for the human person. Physically, our physical health, our spiritual health, our psychological health, mental health, and our relationships. And it would make sense that all of that's saying the same thing, because God made creation, He gave us the church and the Bible, and all science does is show us how amazing everything is that God made, and how it works, and how it works best.
Right.
So I have these columns, and they all match up. And then I have this sexual revolution over here out in left field, totally unscientific, telling us to do what's bad for ourselves. And we have decades of data now that has proven and showed us that everything God ever taught us was good for us actually is. Everything God ever taught us is bad for us actually is. But we insist on kind of being seduced by these easy ways of doing things that require nothing of us.
Yeah, we have to wrap up sadly here, but it's like it's a fallen male model of sexuality. We should say that the world's embraced. And you make a beautiful point that if we want true equality between the sexes, promote marriage, promote chastity, promote NFP, that this will serve the dignity of both spouses, especially the women.
Yes, and men were never intended to have sex that way, just promiscuously, right? So we have to teach our young men, who's teaching them how to initiate the gift of love and life properly. That's their job, that's what they do. Women receive the gift of love and life and then return it. But it's men's job to initiate that. And if we can teach our young men how to do that properly, the whole thing of dating, we don't know how to date anymore. Nobody's dating. So we've got to, and we don't want to go back to some past glorious era that never actually existed. This is moving forward. Theology of the body is the way forward, taking into account that we passed through the sexual revolution in all its morphing, and now we want to reclaim what's actually good for us.
Thank you so much, sister, for being on Life on the Rock.